Good morning and welcome to First Service Residential's legislative webinar. During this session, we will discuss community association legislation specific to the Suncoast area, Tampa Bay, St. Pete. My name is Jake House, Director at First Service Residential in the Tampa St. Pete area. Currently, I'm located at our headquarters here in St. Petersburg. We've assembled a great panel of respected local experts in community association law to discuss the laws passed in the 2021 Florida legislative session and its potential impact on community associations like yours. Joining us are State Senator Jeff Brandes, who has served the 24th District, Pinellas County, since 2016. He was elected to the Senate in 2012 and served the House of Representatives before that in 2010. He is a Florida native and also from St. Petersburg. Curtis Hamlin, also a Florida native, is a principal with Porges, Hamlin, Knowles, and Hawk, PA, with offices in Bradenton, Florida. Sorry. Mr. Hamlin is a board certified real estate lawyer and board certified in condominium and plan development law. He concentrates his practice in the areas of community association law, real estate, including residential and commercial projects, with a specific emphasis on affordable housing development in Florida. And also we have Travis Moore, a longstanding legislative partner of First Service Residential and president of Moore Relations. Senator Brandes, would you like to say hello to everyone?
Hi, thank you all for having me. Look forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Senator. Curtis.
Good morning. This will be an interesting discussion. A lot happened this year.
Absolutely. Travis.
Thanks, Jake, and thank you, Senator and Curtis, for joining us. And I agree, a lot did happen this session, so it will be a nice, interesting, hopefully informative discussion. And I appreciate being a part of First Services team.
Thank you all for being here. As many of you know, the Florida legislature convened on Tuesday, March 2nd for its annual 60-day legislative session. Every year, First Service Residential works diligently with legislators and industry stakeholders to represent and protect the interest of community associations. Today, we will have the opportunity to hear directly from our local state senator, Jeff Brandes, as we discuss the main bills passed in 2021. And most importantly, what impact those will have on community associations. As always, we recommend that you consult your specific association attorney for specific property-related questions before you make any changes. So we have a great agenda for you today. We will mainly be reviewing these bills that involve COVID liability, specifically Senate Bill 72, insurance, Senate Bill 76, the Community Association Package, Senate Bill 630, and also we're going to touch on derelict vessels. So with that, let's jump right in. We'll move to Travis. Travis, let's address COVID liability. Can you take us through what the legislature passed and what it means for condominiums and community associations?
Sure, thank you, Jake. Last year, if somebody told me I was going to be on a Zoom meeting, I thought that would have just been very fast. So this is something that we all, at the end of the 2020 session, which happened to end mid-March, right when we were all beginning to realize the COVID liability issue or the COVID issue affecting all of our lives in every way, from education to healthcare and every impacted every area of our lives, was just beginning to kind of take shape. Senator Brandes, the governor, others immediately got to work on various parts of how to deal with it, from the healthcare, obviously the healthcare issue, unemployment issue that came, but also then how we were going to be able to reopen businesses and be able to get back to where we are getting back to now. And that issue became a COVID liability. Senator Brandes took that on. In fact, he's chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. So it was something that was right in his wheelhouse. And so I'm going to really kick it off to him. And then I can add some additional color as we proceed. But Senator, do you want to talk to us about the kind of how that came to be, the work that you did to pass it, and how grateful we are? Because I could envision COVID becoming the next, like sinkhole issue, as you see billboards that were, going up, as we've all seen, like up in Pasco County. I could just imagine, did you get COVID from your condo? Call this lawyer. And so, Senator Brandis.
Well, I think it really highlights the point that we were trying to address with the COVID liability bill. The governor has made it a major point for Florida to continue to open up, and has made Florida really a beacon of freedom in the country as far as its openness. But one of the things that Florida is really a judicial hellhole in many ways. We are one of the most litigious states. Our tort laws have not been truly addressed in decades. And so we find ourselves in a challenging area where we want to open, but also have a very litigious environment that we would open back up into. And so it became clear early on that we were going to have to move towards liability protections for businesses and for people in general, to be able to truly open back up again. And so that's what really the legislation does. It really is in two parts. One deals with generally everybody but healthcare providers, and then the second part deals with just healthcare providers. But we'll really focus on that first portion, which is essentially all people, all businesses, nonprofits that don't provide healthcare services. And for those, we think ours is largely the strongest liability protections in the country, for businesses and people, homeowners included. To me, that was incredibly important for us. Really, there's a multi-step process that somebody would have to go through to prove that they contracted COVID at that individual's facility. They would have to go see a physician. They would have to have that physician sign off that there was a likely nexus to them getting COVID at that facility. And then they would have to prove that with clear and convincing evidence, which is a higher standard than preponderance of the evidence. And so those two factors predominantly show that it's very unlikely that you would be able to bring a successful suit unless there was some form of gross negligence that the condo or the homeowner or the business perpetrated. For example, it's not that they left the salt shaker on the table or didn't wipe down the door handles enough. It's that they knowingly had somebody come onto the property with COVID, and then they required them to work anyways. That would be considered gross negligence, versus simple negligence, which would be the other types of examples that we potentially talk through. So to me, it's a very high bar, probably one of the highest in the country that somebody would have to meet in order to prove COVID liability in the state of Florida. And it should really bring a lot of comfort to individuals and businesses that, one, their neighbor's not going to sue them if they came over and contracted COVID, or two, that the business or nonprofit would have some continuing liability. And finally, we made the bill retroactive. So it really goes back in time as much as possible and says, look, we recognize that COVID was a global pandemic, that businesses had conflicting guidance. Remember, we went from no masks to masks to 2 masks. At the same time, our healthcare providers were using a shower cap, a homemade mask, and a trash bag as personal protective equipment. So we were in this wild world where there wasn't enough gear, there was conflicting guidance, and we think that the state law needed to recognize that. So we set this very high bar. We think that's very positive, and we think that should bring a lot of comfort to associations that they can now fully reopen without the fear of a lawsuit from COVID hanging over their head.
And thank you, Senator Curtis. I know that we were talking and discussing, wanting to make sure as these bills were being, Senator Brandis, I think, started drafting this bill with some folks like in June of last year, and and I think it was somewhat kind of beginning to be formulated out of or used as a pattern, the Georgia bill, because they were just kind of ahead of us in the legislative schedule. But then we improved it, as Senator Brandis said. But Curtis, we were wanting to make sure that associations, which are corporations, but they're not for-profit corporations, but they have, the elevator banks. You look at some of the towers in downtown St. Pete. I mean, these are big corporate-like office towers. I mean, They have elevator banks and amenities, and we wanted to make sure they were included. So, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're right, Travis. When when that was all going on, my firm represents a lot of high-rise condominiums, and there was significant concern about access to buildings and what they should be doing. And we knew that this bill was going to move through the legislature. And there's a concept called business entity in the statute. And through your actions and getting one of the members of the Community Association Florida Legislative Alliance that I serve on, and you're our lobbyist, got him on the committee and made sure that the definition of business entity included corporations created under Chapter 617, which in my experience covers every community association, whether it be a condominium or a homeowner association or a cooperative. So I think the legislature recognized the concerns of all the 50,000 plus associations in the state and got us covered.
Right. And I remember going to Senator Brandis.
Gave a lot
Yeah,
of comfort to our association clients.
Right. Sharing that with him, and he was like, yeah, I mean, and what part of, everybody are you not seeing that this kind of covers? So thank you, Senator, because we have volunteer board members. They were scared because if a claim came through, their insurance company was saying, hey, if it's a virus, that's excluded. We're not covering it. So the association would be on the hook themselves. They're not going to get any insurance help. So they were, and as you said, we were getting directives from everywhere from, the city of Gulfport to the federal government and everywhere in between. And so what do you follow? What do you do? So this I think provides great protection. And I will say, I had a call from another state senator that Senator Brandis serves with that represents part of Palm Beach County. And she called and said, hey, I'm reading an article here where there's an association, and this was this year. I mean, this was after session. She said, we passed Senator Brandis's bill. It got signed into law by the governor on March 29th. Why is this association not opening up the pool? Because, we have people that are paying every month to use the pool. So there is that balance. And I said, yes. I mean, they need to talk to their attorney, but they do have protections. They do not need to be, concerned. So thank you, Senator Brandis. And that is the law of the state. As I mentioned, it was one of these effective upon becoming law. The governor signed it. The legislature started March 2nd, and that got signed, March 29th. So it was like one of the first bills, if not the first bill, I think that went to him. So Senator Brandis, thank you for that. We're going to move real quickly to another issue that's become very important to associations. And again, Senator Brandis was extremely busy and decided to take on a few issues. Why not? And so if COVID liability wasn't enough, let's take on property insurance, among all the other things he was doing. So another bill that Senator Brandis worked on, it was sponsored by a fellow senator of his down actually in the Bradenton, Sarasota area that chairs the insurance committee in the Senate. But Senator Brandis was really kind of the driving force and a big help to help get that passed. And that was Senate Bill 76. Also was signed, I believe that goes into effect July 1. So Senator Brandis, do you want to talk a little bit about, because as you know, you're getting calls, constituent emails about, hey, my insurance rates are going up. Not a whole lot we can do about fires in California and storms and freezes in Texas and all of that. But there were some things from a liability side, I think, that we could do. So Senator Brandis, do you want to hit on that as well?
Sure. So Florida really is kind of ground zero for insurance fraud. And we've seen that really proliferate over the state over the last few years. It started off in South Florida as fraud related to water damage and water claims. We've seen that now metastasize into claims about roofs in Central Florida, to the point where it's beginning to really affect insurance premiums at a pretty critical level. And if we use just one gauge as a barometer, we look at the growth of Citizens property insurance. So when I first started in the beginning of session, Citizens was starting to grow at about 3,000 policies a week. By the end of session, just 2 months later, they were up to 5,500 policies a week in growth. Now understand, we've long worked to depopulate Citizens. We've moved from 1.5 million policies, which were where we're at just a decade ago, to now below about 500,000 policies. But we believe that by the end of the year, we'll be back to about 800,000 policies. This just shows the lack of health of the property insurance market in Florida. We're beginning to see more and more investors pulling out of the state, companies closing down, restricting business, writing less properties as the fraud continues to grow and many of the fraudulent claims make writing business in Florida unprofitable for the insurance companies. And so we have to kind of rectify this. And so Senate Bill 76 begins to address that issue. One of the major problems we had in Florida was what we call the one-way attorney fee statute, which was that if you were to receive $1 more than your insurance, than the insurance premium, than the insurance offered you, then you were to receive all of your legal fees, which was really just an incentive for law firms to become smoke billowing factories of lawsuits, recognizing that a good portion of them would get to that $1 over settlement, and then ultimately all of the fees would be paid. Virtually no other state in the country had that formula. We really looked at states like Texas that had worked to address and had done some litigation reform. And so one of the key pieces of this bill was that aspect of litigation reform. Another aspect that we're seeing a lot more of, and I'm sure many of the people that are going to be watching this have experienced it, is the issue of roof claims, where we have more and more individuals going out advertising that they'll do free roof inspections, that they can replace your roof for free. And this is really something that we just haven't seen historically, but it's driving premiums through the roof. In fact, had we done nothing, it would not be out of the realm of possibility for premiums to double in the next 3 years, and then continue to go up after that. We were really in a crisis mode where we're seeing premiums skyrocket, coverage being reduced, and insurers fleeing the market. And so this was really the first, what I hope is one of the major steps, but a first step in dealing with that. I think there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. This bill did not go as far as I would like. I think that we're already starting to see insurers already trying to see roofers begin to work around the legislation. For example, they can't directly advertise roof inspections now, but we're starting to see them say, well, we're not doing a true roof inspection, we're doing a storm inspection, or we're doing a solar install inspection. And if we happen to find roof damage as part of the solar install, then we're going to come out and claim that on your roof. So this is one of the things where Florida really has to become a leader in fighting fraud. It's one of the issues that I'm going to continue to work on. Is the fact that we've got to put more resources into fighting this type of fraud, because your neighbor's getting a new roof and his neighbor's getting a new roof means your premium's going up, because ultimately you're paying for it. But when people start seeing insurance products as a home maintenance warranty instead of what it truly is, which is an insurance for catastrophic loss, then we start to see the premiums reflect those of a home warranty product versus a catastrophic loss product. And that's why rates are rising, and why the legislature's got to do what we did, but also has to do more to address roofing fraud and the other problems of the Florida insurance market.
Right. I think this was a good, it sounds cliche, but a good first step. But because it's such a complex system, it's a global market, because the carriers are all buying their reinsurance from even a smaller subset of carriers, and they're essentially insuring all over the planet for things, so that as that availability shrinks, it's obviously becomes more costly, and associations the largest part of their budgets, almost every association's budget is insurance, because they're paying for these buildings. And like you said, they'd have somebody come and say, hey, look, I got your neighbor association a new roof. Let me come up onto your roof. By the way, here's a gift card or whatever, and get up there. And of course, I think it was something like if they could find, and Senator, you would know, like 25%, 20% damage, whatever, you got 100% new roof. And that's just, I mean, it was just became crazy. The other thing I thought that was very important that you did was the statute of limitations. When we were seeing these IRMA claims, September 10th of last year of 2020 was the date of like the 3-year statute of limitation, or I'm sorry, maybe it was at that point, it was 5-year or whatever of IRMA claims. But so all of a sudden there was like this huge influx of claims that were turned in literally on the last day. And when, our regulators would do analysis and the companies, the longer out those claims that were coming in, like those were the ones that were most fraudulent and by huge numbers. And they all, that getting that into the economics of your policy, that drives up the rates for everybody. And when people were saying, oh, well, taking it to 3 years is too, 3 years to 2 years is too little. I'm looking at states like Louisiana, which I think they have hurricanes and storms and, the like. I think they're like 6 months is their statute, right?
So I think that's another key aspect of this piece of legislation was for cat events, for major named storms, you had 3 years post that event to file your claim.
Right. And that's, I mean, yeah, if you have a claim, and then you gave them, I thought it was very fair. I mean, within the law now says, once you filed your claim within those 2 years, if they get in and they say, okay, we found this additional damage while they're dealing with that, then you do have some additional time, I think another year for a supplemental. But that initial loss, because the fraud that's in that system, like you said, I saw a report from OIR and it says that Florida has, we have about 7%, almost 7% of all insurance losses in the country. But then our litigation, the litigation side, we're almost 77% of all litigation. And that's like, so of course that's going to drive we lost a company that deals with master association policies in the middle of session. Another one went. An agent used to be able to go out, get you like 12, 15 quotes. Obviously, we learned this in 10th grade economics. I mean, you're going to get a better deal if you have everybody. Now they go out and there's, I think, 3 carriers. And so they, of course, the prices are going to go up. And if I'm a carrier and I'm looking, where am I going to go to offer more policies and open up my book of business? It's not going to be a state where I'm 77% more likely to get hit with a lawsuit. I'm good. I'm going to go. Well,
I think your point really highlights the challenges that's going on in the association and space right now. One of the big challenges is you all have fought for years to get FIGA protection.
Right.
But
right.
The challenge of FIGA protection is it's only available to admitted carriers. But because there's so few admitted carriers in the Florida marketplace anymore that are willing to write condos, your condo associations are often having to go to surplus lines carriers, which are unregulated in forms and rates, and oftentimes and never carry FIGA protection.
No.
So we fought for something so hard over the years, but ultimately have seen that that business shift. And that's one of the things Florida's got to get under control. I think if we can get the policy right at the state level, then you'll see more and more carriers re-enter the condo market because they want to write that business. It's a good business for them oftentimes, but it isn't good business in a world of litigation that has ensued in Florida. And you're exactly right. Florida represents 8% of total claims and 76% of total litigation in the United States.
Yeah, that's a balance that's way whacked.
Totally unsustainable. right, again, what's happening here is the attorneys are getting rich, and the people that are paying for it are the people that live in your associations.
Right. And I think, that, and Jake and others know more about this from a real estate economic standpoint. But if we don't get the insurance thing under control, I think that affects the real estate market.
It's the Achilles heel of the Florida real estate market. It really
What's
is.
that?
It's the Achilles heel of the Florida real estate market. If people start paying more in premiums than they're paying in mortgage, the you know the real estate market in Florida will come to a screeching halt, and people will find other alternatives.
Right.
Right. Largely, it's been hidden because of low interest rates. People have been able to refinance, and they haven't seen what really is going on because their monthly payment hasn't changed all that much, despite the fact that they've lowered their interest rates. But that's going to start playing out in a very different way over time. One, as interest rates begin to rise, but two, as premiums continue to rise and people start seeing 30 or 40% rate increases, and they're having to pay an extra $1,000 or $2,000 a year on a fixed income just to pay for the same insurance that they bought last year.
Right. Well, yeah. And I remember a comment that you'd made in debate. I can't remember if it was on the floor in committees, something about, and this was something you dealt with, maybe even Ben when you were in the House, certainly just into the Senate, but here in Tampa Bay on the flood insurance issue, you made this comment about that people were putting on their real estate signs in their front yard, no, in the space that used to say, pool and that was off. And instead there was now something that said, which is, I remember when you said it, I'm like, oh my God, I remember those days. It literally said, no flood insurance necessary, because that was driving. And that wasn't just, Terra Verde, Shore Acres. I mean, that was becoming a problem everywhere.
Exactly right. And that's another issue that Florida's continuing to deal with. Luckily, we've created really the largest private market in flood insurance in the country based on some legislation I worked on a number of years ago.
Right.
We're seeing some positive successes. I think what's important is that the governor recognizes this, that the community associations continue to talk to members and tell them about what's going on with premiums. I think bring your bills, bring your last historic bills to when you sit down with legislators and you tell them, look, this is unsustainable. We've got to fix this. We're seeing massive rate increases. Our individuals are on fixed incomes largely. We can't sustain this. We need help. And the legislature should begin to react.
Well, thank you. And thank you for, again, everybody, when we send out alerts or whatever and say, please visit and talk to, your legislators, it matters. It does. So thank you for that. We're going to use that insurance as kind of a jumping off piece to a big community association package that passed. It was about 100 and some pages of a lot of things that we've been working on for a number of years. Finally passed, was signed last week by the governor, will go into effect on July 1. And that is Senate Bill 630 that Jake mentioned, the community association package. There's the first piece in that bill was dealing with insurance. And Curtis, why don't you kind of take us through and hit some of the highlights of that community association package that we've worked on and passed, and again, as we noted, Governor DeSantis signed last week.
Yeah, Travis, and just to put it in perspective, the last major community association bill that was passed was in 2018. I happened to have been the chair of CAI FLA that year, and that bill had some flaws that we've now corrected 3 years later, and I'm going to touch on a couple of those. But one thing that had come up is this whole subrogation issue, where a homeowner's or a condo unit owner's policy would allow, if they had any claim, would allow subrogation rights, and that means that whatever insurer their policy was written through, they could then make a claim against the policy of the association. And so what was occurring is that a unit owner would file a claim for a water leak. their company would pay the claim and then file a subrogation claim against the association for sometimes 10 times the amount of the actual claim that had been paid. And now what we've done is taken that ability out and says if the association can't subrogate against the unit owner's policy can't subrogate against the association. And that was an amendment to Chapter 627, which is the basic insurance provision or insurance chapter. And so we're hoping that that will put a halt to these claims, because basically there was one insurer that issued CH6 policies, and that was a big part of their business plan, was to have subrogation claims. And all the other insurers were in favor of this change. And so it had broad support, and not only among the insurance companies, but among the legislature as well. So we're hoping that we can put a stop to some of those things. And like I said, that 630, which is now Chapter 2021-99 of the laws of Florida, if you want to follow along, covers changes in all three types of community associations. So there was something for condos, cooperatives, and homeowner associations. The summary I'm going to give, a brief, basically is going to deal with condominiums and homeowner associations, but realize some of these things affected all three. One thing that is applicable to all of the associations was the emergency powers language that had been in the statutes, and they were drafted in the mid 2000s after, if you recall, there were 8 hurricanes that hit the state in 2004 and 5, and the emergency powers really, as they were crafted, dealt with structural damage to either condominium buildings or to community association common properties. And yet we had a pandemic that created large numbers of issues. And so the DVTR issued an executive order saying this applies to medical emergencies. And now the legislature has come along and confirmed that. So we don't have to rely, if God forbid this happens again, we don't have to rely on an emergency order. And it also dealt with some other issues that dealing with access to units during times of medical emergencies and things like that. So I commend those sections to your reading, and I think the legislature did a good job for us there. In the homeowner association, let me jump to something that has been in the Condominium Act for years, actually since 2004, and that's leasing restriction amendment. That has been in effect for condominiums, as I said, since 2004. And basically, if there are certain types of restrictions which are identified in the statute, only those owners who voted affirmatively for the amendment or who purchased their units after that were bound by them. So with all the long-term leasing in homeowner associations, that economic force, the hedge funds and everything that bought all those units, came to the legislature year after year. That first started in 2018 when I was the chair of FLA, and finally they've gotten these things passed. But there's a distinction between what is applicable in condominiums and what is now applicable in homeowner associations. And this is something that the stakeholders on behalf of associations were able to negotiate. And that is that you can still have leasing restrictions that govern leases of 6 months or less. You can restrict leasing to no more than 3 leases per year. And so that gives our community association, homeowner association, still a lot of leeway to pass these types of restrictions. There are provisions that say that it's not going to be binding except on people who voted in favor of it. And there's a provision that the heir of a person who didn't vote for it can succeed to those rights as well. So that's something that associations in condominiums have dealt with, that tracking essentially since 2004, and now it's something that HOAs are going to have to start formulating a policy for.
Curtis, I just want to mention real quick that I think to that point, I think we have an opportunity to go back to the legislature, Senator Brandis and others on, and getting the Condo Act to now kind of mirror
Yes,
what
we do.
720. So it would say for long-term rentals, leases, correct. You know, it only, you know, it doesn't apply unless you consent to it. But would allow us the flexibility, as you put, on the short-term rentals, it would not apply. So that's just something that I know going forward, trying to keep the chapters kind of similar. And I think that would work well. And I think it would be a big win for condos if we were able to get that. I just mentioned that as something that we want to do next year, because Senator Brandis, again, also chairs the Judiciary Committee where a lot of this stuff goes through.
Correct. One other thing in Chapter 718 that was changed is the transfer fee limitation, which had been $100 for decades, it seems, and that's now been raised to $150. And there's also a consumer price index adjuster every 5 years that will take effect. So that will lessen some of the financial burden, because we were hearing stories that you couldn't do the background checks on a potential applicant for $150. And so it was costing associations money to do every one of these. One thing that happened in 28, and I'm bouncing back and forth between 18 and 720, because they're just bits and pieces that affect everybody. 2018, the legislature put in a provision about association notices, saying that associations had to use the addresses from the tax collectors' records to send association notices. We've changed that, and every association has, whether it be condo or HOA, has to maintain a list of members' addresses. Condos have always used their own internal address list for notices, but HOAs, the legislature, and we think it was staff, it wasn't the legislature per se, it just happened, put in this requirement that you had to go to the property appraiser's office and get the record. Now we've changed that and gotten that changed back to using the official records from the association, which you're obligated to maintain anyway. Couple of other things, back to condos. In 2018, there was a provision about condominium board members can't serve for more than 8 consecutive years, period. Well, that begged the question of, when does your 8 years begin if you're currently on the board? So we've now got a situation, or a segment in the statute that says that 8 years began to run on July 1 of 2018, which was the effective date of the last community association bill. One thing in condominiums now, for your notices of members meetings, you have to include the agenda of the meeting, and you have to publish that notice and agenda for at least 14 days. You can't just say, we're going to have a members meeting, show up and see what happens. You have to give the members notice of that provision. One thing that was also included now that affects all 3 chapters is the recall language. Everybody could file a recall petition with the division. They had jurisdiction over recalls for homeowner associations, as well as inherent statutory jurisdiction over condominiums and cooperatives. The legislature now says you also have to file a court action concurrently with the filing of your petition for recall, which, given the complexities of filing separate actions, you can't just file an administrative petition for free with the division. You have to go to court, which is perhaps will cut down on the number of recalls. In our area of the state, I've been doing this since 1984. I have never dealt with a recall petition. I suspect the same is prevalent in other parts of the Bay Area. South Florida is I mean, they think that's blood sport down there is to have recall petitions. And that's just the way it is. So I think that's a good way to, again, deter that kind of, I won't call it harassment, but it's a disincentive for people to volunteer to serve on their boards.
Yeah, I constantly try to research how the Dakotas did it, where they were able to get a North Dakota and a South Dakota, because I feel like we might, at least for condo world, they come in with these things from South Florida, and I'm like, we don't have those issues in St. Petersburg.
Well,
So
let's just say we don't want to draw that line too far north. If we're going to divvy up the state, I definitely want to be in North Florida. One other thing, and this is again a benefit to condominiums. In the homeowner context, you've always been able to use pre-suit mediation as a way to resolve differences between associations and members and associations. Condominiums only had arbitration in front of a division. So now the legislature has allowed pre-suit mediation, similar to what we have in Chapter 720, to come over into the condominium statute. Here's one that's of real interest to condominiums, and it's electric vehicle charging stations. This became part of the statute in 2018. It was at first limited to common element parking spaces. Now it can be an exclusively assigned parking space, and you can go in and get your right to put your electric vehicle charging station in. But as an added benefit, you can also ask your association to let you plumb in a natural gas charging station into the common elements or your assigned parking space. So we're not sure how that one's going to play out, but we sure hope there aren't a lot of explosions in condo garages as a result of that.
Cue Senator Brandis's background with fire, if we can get that.
Well, we think it originated with the House sponsor whose family is involved in the LP gas business in North Florida, where a lot of farm vehicles use LP gas. But we'll see how that one plays out.
well, and I think a good thing in this, I mean, with the work that Senator Brandis does on electric vehicles, and I think we'll pretty soon have the flying vehicles that it won't be the Tesla, it'll be the Brandis. So Duke Energy came to us during session because they wanted to be able to put a charging station for the community. So say the condo wanted to have one in the part, Vinoy Place, where they wanted to have one, charging station that then the community could use. And I was like, well, I thought that that the Tesla charging station would be different than if you had a Volt so I thought you'd have to have a whole, kind of like when you have your phone, if you have an Apple charger and you have an Android, blah, blah. But they said, no, they have this, that the charging station itself is the same. It's just you get a cable when you get your car that, that like an adapter or whatever that you use for your particular type of vehicle. But anyway,
I think it's really important, but it's an important topic to have. So today,
Yeah.
electric vehicles represent less than 2% of vehicles on Florida's roads. But by the end of the decade, leading analysts are telling me that they believe 25% of all new cars sold will be electric. So it's something that definitely condo associations need to be
Right.
thinking about, planning for, especially new condos, if they can
Exactly.
go in and at least put in the conduit early.
And I think it's an amenity that people will want.
Oh, absolutely. No, when you get to 25% of vehicles in a condo being electric, it's definitely going to be an amenity people want. About 90% of all charging takes place at the home. People don't want to charge on the road. They want to be able to every night just unplug and have a full battery with almost 300 miles of range. So it's going to be something that more and more condos put in as an amenity.
Well, and we were able to, Curtis, so we were able to work with them, and they had said, can we put it in, and then the manager kind of be the one to decide who the billing each month. And I thought that was going to be a little difficult to say that, okay, Mr. Smith used this much for the Teslas. Although there's some condo towers, I know in Fort Lauderdale, there's one where people just put in like their credit card. So it almost like, making copies at Kinko's. So I said, there is a way to work this out. And we were able to do so, to say you could put one in. And to Senator Brandis's point, we said that it would not constitute a commercial, what is it, a commercial alteration? Is that the term, Curtis?
Material alteration.
Material. Thanks, Jake. Yeah, it would not constitute a material alteration, which means you have to go through all this voting, all this stuff. They can just put it in, and then the board handle the handle the billing and how that all will work however they want. Just like there's associations that used to put, maybe they still do, a vacuum system that that members can come and use to vacuum out their cars at a car wash station, whatever. I think this, like as Senator Brandis says, I think making it easier to put these charging stations into a development from the very beginning will make it's just the right thing to do. It's going
Well,
forward.
you're just going to have, you're going to have condo owners demand it. They
Right.
want to buy electric vehicles. I think you're going to move towards a really interesting world where the condo maybe has a couple of vehicles that are shared amongst the condo owners and unit owners. I think that's kind of the world we're moving towards.
Right.
And largely those will be electric.
Well, and the whole time when we were working on this, I remember we were all in these rooms that that we were allowed in the house side. So we would have these rooms in the tower of the house side, these conference rooms, and everybody was saying, well, if we do that, Senator Brandis is going to want this done. So we found a way, and we did it. So that's in the law. So anyway, go ahead.
One other comment I'd make is that, and it's along the lines of Senator Brandis' comment, I'm beginning to see, I review a lot of documents for associations that are going through transition, and newer condominium documents are already picking up on this idea of common element electric vehicle charging for the community. And we're seeing designated parking areas or spaces on the condominium plat that make those a common element. And those are showing up already in just these last few years that this become prevalent. And they're picking up on the ideas of what's in the statute now and dealing with that communal billing and all those issues. So this is being absorbed into the marketplace very quickly by developers and their council to provide for these things. And I do think it's a good idea to have some flexibility to let older communities go back and sort of retrofit their communities to meet these needs now, as opposed to forcing a material alteration. But I think that's a great idea.
To Curtis's point, if I could just add, just to bring some color to it, we're currently consulting with 8 different developers of high-rise communities in this market. Every single one of them is putting in electrical vehicle charging stations. And for developers, it's an incentive, it's an amenity, it's an upsell. But to everyone's point, this is a demand. And on a go-forward basis, with a blank piece of land, that's when a tower is going to come up, it's going to have electrical vehicle charging stations. So
Yeah, Kurt, that's good. Yeah, that puts it right to home, to home here in our area, what we deal with. So anyway, Curtis, you want to continue?
I was just going to make one last comment about changes. One change in Chapter 720 had to do with reserves. The reserve statute and HOAs several years ago, I proposed that we sort of bring it into line with condominiums, and that meant you'd have thought I wanted to propose that the sun rises in the east, in the west, and it doesn't. But what they've done is they've allowed developers to say, if we don't have to fund reserves, and if we're going to have reserves, they need to be adopted by a majority of the members. And it also deals with some other issues as a carryover to some litigation that was filed some number of years ago. And when I made this proposal, I recognized that developers don't want to pay reserves and just came flat out and said it. But that didn't get us very far. I still think we ought to have a budget meeting like we do in condos and those kinds of things, but that's for another day. But there are some changes in reserve calculations for homeowner associations. That does not affect condominiums or cooperatives. There were no changes in the reserve aspects of that. And as I said, it was a 100-page bill. When they put it in the session law, it got down to about 60. Pretty soon it'll be integrated into the statute. So if you want to see just the highlights, go look at either the session law or the laws of Florida. But it was a very comprehensive bill, and we're glad it made it through.
And a good site to do that, by the way, is flsenate.gov. It's still set. They had the special session, but now it's back to kind of being set for the 2021 bills. So you just have to put the bill number. All Senate bills are even numbers. So you just put 630, and it'll bring you up an analysis, all kinds of good information. And their site to me is just easier to navigate than the House site.
I always promote the Senate site.
Yeah. There were things in there dealing with for condos and for HOAs on like the fines. It said in the law, the fines, if you're assessed a fine, it's due 5 days after the fining committee met. Well, you as a person that's getting fined don't know maybe when they met, or so we changed that to say it's 5 days after your provided notice and after you're given the fact that, hey, a fine has been assessed. That's when that 5-day clock starts. So things like that. You only have to keep bids for condos. You only have to keep bids, not the ones that you actually contract. But if you go out to bid for landscaping and you get 7 bids, you don't have to keep all those bids forever. You only have to keep now the bids for a year. Things along those lines. One thing I thought was just interesting was I had a senator, as the bill was going through the process, senator from North Florida actually said, I got contacted by a HOA president that we have somebody that's going to our gatehouse. It's a gated community, going to our guard gate every single day, and asking, and the board's kind of thinks they have to just provide it to her, but this person is asking every day for the license plates of who's coming and going, the time they're coming and going, who they're going to see. And I don't know if it was I don't know why she was doing this, but she was going every day. And they said, do we have, because there's kind of a catch-all that we think that we have to provide her these records. Do we have to? And the senator said to me, I want to fix that. I don't want him to provide. And I said, absolutely. So we put in the law for 720 that gated homeowners association visitor records are exempt from inspection and copying. Now you should keep them, in case there's a crime in the neighborhood or whatever, it's probably good to have, but you don't have to give them to anybody. So it's things like that are originated, Jake, directly from our members, from presidents. I know presidents that have contacted Senator Brandis here in the area that talk to him about different things, whether it's insurance or the derelict vessel issue or whatever. The FIGA issue that Senator Brandis mentioned came from members. So it's very important for folks to be actively involved. And that's, Senator Brandis, they get sick and tired of me walking the halls, which this session I couldn't walk the halls. But it's different when an association says, hey, I'm in your district and I represent a building with 300 units. Yeah, it's just, they're going to get it. That's a better way to go with messaging. Jake, were there any questions or anything that we want to talk about?
Yeah, I think a good jumping off point is, that citizens interaction and, the Association for Bayway Communities, ABC out on the Bayway, had a major issue with derelict boats. So could we touch base on who that was impacting and how we were able to, from, a citizen inquiry up to doing something about it? I think that's a good story.
Yeah, very good. Yes, that is something that Senator Brandis, really kind of the whole, our delegation works well together, but Senator Brandis, Senator Roussan, even last few years, former Representative Webb was involved. This year, Representative Cheney got very involved real early with that. And it was just a concern for that area. If you know the Bayway and Tierra Verde and that that particular area, Bogaciega Bay area has an issue there with derelict vessels. So we were able to work on language against Senator Brandis, Senator Roussan, and others, helped to get it into Senator Hudson's Bill 1086, which is a bill that was dealing with boating issues for FWC. And they were instrumental in getting the derelict vessel language put into that bill. That is one that, as we've been monitoring bills, it has not gone yet to the governor, but I expect that it'll go. It may have even gone today. I mean, they're going fast and furious now. But working with FWC, since it's their package, obviously that's kind of an executive branch agency. I don't think there's any issue that he'll be signing that. But that'll help with being able to, we worked with the city of St. Petersburg. They had helped to kind of develop that language with us. So it'll be easier to get rid of, and it'll be more penalties and that kind of thing, but it'll be much easier for FWC and law enforcement and others to get rid of these derelict vessels.
Good. All right, let's just do there's 2 or 3 things. Let's just do a rapid fire just so we cover everything. You know, we don't have to spend a ton of time. So one question that came out is, has there been any change or discussion to online voting, right? So when the pandemic hit, we were unable to go into in-person meetings. What's the talk around, conducting votes via online, digital platforms as we, work to enhance, associations in the digital age? Any thoughts on that?
Curtis?
Well, electronic voting for members exists. We do maybe need to streamline the adoption process to make it a little more cost effective for associations to be able to adopt electronic voting, because right now the statute's been the same since 2015. The board has to send a copy of the notice of meeting where they're going to vote on a resolution to every member. And that can be cost prohibitive at $3 to $4 a mailing. When the members don't get to vote on it, they vote by either electing into electronic voting or not, which I'm a big proponent of. And I encourage all of our associations to take advantage of that, because of the time that a big association spends counting votes can run into the hours. And you really need to streamline that process. I think we're going to see more members, more boards use electronic means. Just like we're doing today, you can have a board meeting where every member can see every board member, and they can see their votes and have those. So I'm a big proponent of that. I think it's a great, I'm like Travis, I'd never heard of Zoom till March of last year, and now it's something we do almost daily, and it's going to really affect our lives. And I think we do need to be flexible, because just as this is being recorded, a board meeting can be recorded, and you've got that record until the minutes are finalized. So I'm a big proponent of it.
Right, and I think, apathy is a big problem for associations. We're always trying to get people to go to meetings, to serve on the board, to be involved and engaged, because everybody's so busy that being involved in trying to get them involved in their community association is difficult. So if we can make it easier for them, I think people should be able to vote. If they have a condo and they happen to be away back in Ohio or wherever, but they have a condo here in St. Petersburg, I think they should be able to go on, and there's issues, let them, they should be able to vote. They're sitting by the pool. There's an app, there's apps and things out there now that associations can utilize. So I think we already have the ability, and I agree it should be made easier for people for members to vote. The other thing is the discussion needs to maybe happen regarding boards being able to vote, but I think we can find a way to do that. A lot of it is, the board members can communicate with each other via email, but they can't vote on anything because I can't be involved in that meeting because I'm not involved in that email thread chain. But if they notice that they're going to have a meeting like this, I think they should be able to vote electronically on the board. So I think it's something that, like, it's just like the electric vehicle charging station. Associations need to kind of wake up, maybe, if that makes any
Yeah, so
sense.
I
And
think
they-
it's really all about building flexibility into the system and allowing, basically local control of individual associations.
right.
Every condo, every association is going to be slightly different. There's not one size fits all model. We should allow multiple models and allow flexibility.
Yeah. And so that is something that we will be working on, Jake, I assure you.
And that's a good segue into the next. So just two more questions. One, many of our residents are working from home. And so they had questions around home-based businesses and how that's going to affect condo associations. So anyone want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, well, there was a bill that passed, House Bill 403. I don't remember the Senate bill, but the House bill was what passed, and we worked with the sponsor, both Senator Perry in the Senate, Representative Gia Lombardo, a freshman from the West Coast in the House. And we actually put in the exact same language into that bill that we put into the vacation rental bill each year, even though it's not passed. That Senator Brandis kind of helped us develop its comfort language. It just says, that you can't override the documents of the association. It's a contract. You've signed it. You're a party to a contract. So, so the home-based businesses that you can't open up, I don't know, a CrossFit gym in your garage if the association rules, but we do want to be able to provide for flexibility because, for more and more people to be able to work out at home. It's just a difference between working out of your home and operating a business. So your association documents still are not preempted or superseded. Senator Brandis, do you?
No, I mean, I think you're exactly right. I mean, look, there's a wide variety of home-based businesses, and I think it covers everything from somebody who does a little bit of financial planning on the side to somebody who wants to open a auto mechanic shop in the downstairs, parking garage, right? Like that. We need to recognize that there's a wide swath of businesses that we would have no problem with, and there's quite a few that we would have a lot of problem with. So we need to allow, again, flexibility for condos to deal with it on an individualized basis.
Right. He keeps mentioning that's the buzzword. Really, it's flexibility because there's different types of associations. I mean, I have a townhome community downtown St. Pete, 24 units, 4 buildings is quite different than the one. Which will be quite different than Reflection that's going across the street. So, and then there's also, like you said, there's different types of businesses. There's somebody making soup that maybe wants to, makes the best soup and wants to sell soup or something and candles or I don't know. And then and I'm working out of my home right now. So, you got to just be flexible on that. But home-based businesses is something that certainly that the legislature I know is working on, but we put in language that specifically mentions 7, 18, 19, and 20. It's identical to what we have that we've worked with Senator Brandis, Senator Hudson, and others in the past on associations for vacation rentals as well, which is why we don't care. We don't care what happens with the preemption thing. We don't care if if it's run by the state, the local governments, just as long as it doesn't impact associations. So.
All right, so we'll do one more question, then get out of here. Again, just thank you to all the panelists today for taking time to speak directly to, our residents out there in communities in this area. So, Senator Brandis, how did the 2021 session differ with all of the COVID-19 protocols? It must have been quite a whirlwind. Could you fill us in there?
Yeah, I like to say that the Senate was pretty much like a monastery with less virgins. It was pretty empty in the Florida Senate for the last year. Nobody could enter the building really, other than the legislators and staff, and so it made it very difficult. Frankly, for me, it takes a lot of the fun out of the job. Some of the best part of the job is just the human interaction that I get to meet with different groups, see different people. You miss out on the serendipity of conversations. You overhear things in the hall. You find somebody walking down the hall that needs you for 30 seconds, but that 30 seconds informs you on a major issue. And so it was very sterile in the environment. And I'm really looking forward to moving back into what has been normal for me, which is just a buzz of activity and meetings every 15 minutes and just really getting to hear from people around the state of Florida. So I'm glad this session's over with. I'm glad that we're moving on towards next session, which will be my last. And I'm really looking forward to some of the conversations.
But just out of curiosity, because I think all businesses are dealing with this, bringing people back and doing some remote. Do you think the Senate and the legislative process was more efficient, less efficient because of less human interaction? Just out of curiosity.
It changes the nature of the legislature. Leadership tends to have a lot more control when there's nobody else involved, but that's not always a good thing. And so I think what you really want is informed legislators who are going into committee, as informed as possible on the decisions they're about to make. And when you remove the fact that, you can only have so many people on a Zoom and you can have only so many conversations during that week, I think this last legislative session, you had very uninformed members going into committee, making huge decisions on the state of Florida. And I think that does a disservice overall to the state and definitely to the members.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, some of my best session, I mean, when he says it's a kind of a buzz with activity, Senator Brandis's office is always like one of the busiest. I mean, they're lined up in the office and out the door, and just being able to go in, and I never got to see him in his Patagonia vest one time all session. And that's a highlight for me, because you go in, he sits there in the Patagonia, he looks relaxed, not relaxed, because there's a million things going
I'm
on.
like Mr. Rogers. I put on a Patagonia, I put my different shoes on, and
this very sense of, we're just going to have this little chat. And he's got the room lined up with, stakeholders all around this table that are fighting out and getting to an issue. And he kind of plays this figure, very, professorial. I got the Patagonia sweater that, and I actually bought one because his looks so comfortable, but I never got to see any of that this year. And it was
next year we're bringing it out, and we're back in January. So I'll have a lot of reasons to wear it.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
thank you all so much for this discussion. As part of our promise to deliver exceptional service, First Service Residential will continue to advocate for associations before policymakers and regulators on behalf of our customers, residents, partners. Thank you to our panelists and attendees for participating in today's webinar. Thanks for the questions that were submitted. For articles and other educational materials designed specifically for condominium and homeowner associations, you can always go to fsresidential.com. Thank you all so much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.